Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending upon where you are. Here we are again with another amazing session at the Global Conference on Services and Retail Management. My name is Professor Jihan Çobanoğlu. I'm the McKibben Endowed Chair Professor in the MoMA College of Business at the University of South Florida. I also serve proudly as the co-chair for the GLOSERV conference. Today, I have a distinguished speaker with me today. He's one of our keynote speakers, Mr. Chuck Brooks. Mr. Brooks, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. And we are going to have an amazing session in few seconds. And the title of Chuck's presentation is going to be The Growing Cybersecurity Threats to Services and Retail Industries. Mr. Chuck Brooks is the president of Brooks Consulting International. It's a globally recognized thought leader and subject matter expert, cybersecurity and emerging technologies. LinkedIn named Chuck as one of the top 5 tech people to follow on LinkedIn. He was named by Thomson Reuters as a top 50 global influencer in risk compliance, and by IFSEC as the #2 global cybersecurity influencer. He was featured in 2020 on Altica, who in cybersecurity as one of the top influencers for cybersecurity issues. He was also named as one of the top 5 executives to follow on cybersecurity by Executive Mosaic. Chuck briefed the G20 Energy Conference on Operating Systems Cybersecurity. He is also a cybersecurity expert for the network at the Washington Post, visiting editor at the Homeland Security Today, expert for Executive Mosaic GovCon, and a contributor to Forbes. Chuck is adjunct faculty at Georgetown University's Graduate Applied Intelligence Program and the Graduate Cybersecurity Programs, where he teaches courses on risk management, homeland security, and cybersecurity. He's an MA in International Relations from the University of Chicago and a BA in Political Science from DePauw University and a certificate in International Law from the Hague Academy of International Law. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Chuck Brooks. Chuck, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor. It's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to speaking on a topic that is at the top of my interest, which is, the retail and services industry have been under a siege for basically a decade. We're hearing a lot now about what happened to the Colonial Pipeline just yesterday, where it was taken in a ransomware attack, and the systems for operational technology and IT were taken down. But retail and service industries have been targets of ransomware for many years, and they're usually under the radar because there's so many of them, and they're not as big as something like Colonial Pipeline for the most part. But anyway, I'd like to start my presentation, but first I'll let you know that if you check out last night's Forbes magazine, it's online, Google me, I wrote an article that was published about the growing threats and trends in cybersecurity, many of which I'm going to talk about now, but a lot of them are covered in that article and other articles on my Forbes site. And I encourage you to go look at them and glance at them, and you may have some questions later on in this presentation. But I would like to start, first by giving you what I consider about the preview of what the threats are, who the risk actors are, what some of the key stats are. And so I'll start with the next page. So the really big issue with cybersecurity, and it's a constant issue, is that it was not built for security. It was built for communications. It was built out of a project from DARPA and Xerox, one of my old employers. And they created it to have communication, peer-to-peer communication, without security in mind. And yet now it's the backbone of pretty much everything we do and say in our digital world, and particularly in the last couple of years, where everything has become so much more digitally connected. It's hard to find any industry or vertical which is not dependent on digital communications. And the risks of that, of course, are inherent from the fact that the security was never built in from up front. And a lot of the legacy systems that exist in around the world in the various verticals, whether it be in retail, whether it be in payments, whether it be in buildings, whether it be even in the grid, are relatively old for the most part, lack standards, and have been an easy target for a lot of different hackers. Next slide, please. So if you're going to start out with cybersecurity, of course, I mean, this is pretty self-evident because a lot of the times now these hackers announce themselves or don't deny it, although there are a lot of false flags. But the world has really become so much more dangerous and sophisticated. And a lot of reasons for this is there's been a congruence between nation states and criminal gangs. Often nation states will use them. Also, criminal gangs will that used to operate independently are now coordinating. The primary hackers or threat actors are criminals and organized crime, because 90% of what is really done in cybersecurity is for financial reasons. And then, of course, the hacktivists, you hear about them a lot. Basically, some person in their basement wearing a hoodie is the stereotype, but some of them are pretty good, particularly some of the young gamers, and they've managed to get in and breach some pretty high agencies, including central intelligence agencies and Yahoo and other places. And of course, the state actors, which are, primarily China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, which have been using cybersecurity for a variety of reasons. One, to steal IP, two, to test, critical infrastructure, and three, to cause havoc in political systems. So there's they're probably the most sophisticated of threats because they have millions behind them. They have armies behind them. They're autocratic countries, so they pose a real threat, and they pose also a big threat to retail and to services industry because they go after them often. Industrial espionage is another aspect, often done by friendlies, inside threats, taking a few, I think it was 2 years ago, one of the key people at Tesla left with a lot of informational figures and tried to take it to a competitor. He got caught and prosecuted, but it happens all the time. And then there are other threats. Of course, terrorists in the last few conflicts have now been using information warfare and trying to hack as an extension of their operations. I like this quote, which I'll briefly read, from the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report from this year. And it says, businesses, government, and household cybersecurity infrastructure and/or measures are outstripped for rendered obsolete by increasingly sophisticated and frequent cyber crimes, resulting in economic disruption, financial loss, geopolitical tensions, and/or social instability. That quote sums up pretty much the state of cybersecurity as it is today. Next slide, please. So I like this little cartoon because it really says it how it is. It said, we've narrowed down our security risk to these two groups, everyone and anyone, pretty much. So really, the gist of cybersecurity, if you're connected, you're vulnerable. Even if you're not connected, sometimes you're vulnerable. Depends what you have on your device, whether it transmits, whether it's stolen, whether you leave it unattended. But cybersecurity is many challenges, and you'll see it's not just one thing. It's a many multitudes of different kinds of activities and threats. The next slide, please. So these are some scary cybersecurity statistics. This is not inclusive of everything because it's constantly being updated. But currently, there's over 430 million types of malware online. I'm here that 40,000 new malware sites are created every day. There was a stat from a couple years ago that there was a cyber attack happening every 39 seconds. I think that was from the University of Maryland. I think that stat has been cut in half, largely because of automation, faster downloading, more targets, greater attack surface. So you're really probably seeing an attack, a cybersecurity attack of some sort every 15 seconds. And very honest is that over the next 5 years, billions and billions of records will be breached, and every year it seems to outgross the year before, and despite the fact that we're adding all kinds of new technologies, processes, and budgets among many companies, but it's basically a very formidable obstacle to protect your data. So cybercrime will cost the world, it's predicted. This is a quote from Cybersecurity Ventures, $6 trillion annually by this year. And if you look at that cost and you look at comparative GNPs of most countries, it's bigger. It affects everyone around the globe. No one is immune. It doesn't matter what country you're in, what city you're in, what business you're in. Everyone is a potential victim. And one stat that I find really ominous is that the Homeland Institute and IBM they did a report that indicates that it takes about 206 days to be able to contain a cyber attack. So often with companies, and this is something that you should note, is that most of them don't know that they've been breached. About 50% of them say they've been breached, but it's probably higher than that, a lot more. And one of the biggest problems that I think that accentuates this whole issue of cybersecurity is there's such a lack of qualified cybersecurity workers worldwide. There's just not enough. Governments take some of them, and then as soon as they leave government, the private sector snatches them up. But as long as you have such a big shortage, you're going to have an advantage for the other side who really wants to do damage, and enough people to have a strategy and a system in place to protect the data. So next slide, please. So there are a lot of different types of cybersecurity attacks. I just highlighted a few of them. The bottom line is that they're more targeted, more persistent, and more sophisticated in the last couple of years. All kinds of interesting stuff. If you remember, years back, you may get an email saying you won a lotto and to contact this account, somewhere with some prince. Nowadays, you'll see stuff that is spoofing your bank, spoofing your boss, maybe at work. So realistic that you can often not tell that it is a phishing attack. And phishing attack is still the most predominant way of getting into your data. Social engineering. Sometimes they will look at your social media, get to learn about you, figure out where you've lived, look up your some of the public documents on the website, and figure out who you know and figure a way in to get into you. The hacker may send out hundreds of thousands of automated phishing attacks, and it only takes one to make a difference. And often it's someone just being negligent at a company, and next thing you know, it's gone, all their data, or they're under a ransomware attack, which is another big thing. Ransomware has been around for many years. It is really, in the last couple of years, been reused and more nefariously. And there's several reasons for that. One is it's easy to do, and the biggest reason I think is that that they can get paid. In the past ransomware attack, they were fearful of the attackers were fearful of getting caught. You'd have to have money transfers. It's traceable. There's a treasury record. But now with cryptocurrency, they're able to hide at least easier. There's ways to track them down too. And also, I think that they've be able to monetize. There's much more records on the web right now, in the dark web. Medical records and financial credit cards, and the more people have joined that information sharing among the dark side, there is the easier it is to proliferate it and use it against you. And ransomware certainly works. And in terms of service industries or retail. There has been a lot of retail attacks with ransomware. More likely, it has been in the last couple of years been aimed against hospitals and healthcare organizations, primarily because they don't have the budgets for security, and they're already overwhelmed by COVID-19 and other issues, and they have disparate networks and devices. So they're real easy to attack with ransomware and demand ransom because they don't have liabilities. And so, the other type of attack, distributed denial of service attack, is really when use of bots to trigger, maybe your devices to attack a website and take you down. That's more of a common attack against some of the bigger retailers, right? That has happened often, and I think pretty much every large company has been subject to that. There are defenses against that, luckily. Next slide, please. So what are the most common types of cybercrime? As I mentioned, phishing, overwhelmingly the number one type of attack. Data breaches, identity thief, spoofing, misrepresentation, and a lot of confidence stuff. Basically, if you look at it, you're talking about cybercrime, and cybercrime is I mentioned before, it's a $6 trillion industry. So it's bigger than a lot of other industries out there if you're looking at it. And so the sophistication of some of these actors is obviously paralleling what they see is where the easiest way to get money. Next slide, please. So businesses and retail services are being targeted, and it's a huge impact on operations, your reputation, and for most companies, the bottom line. And most of these retail and services industries have been small businesses because that's really been the bulk of a lot of commerce in the United States, but also around the world. A lot of the mom and pop shops, and so 43% of cyber attacks have been directed against these small and medium businesses. And the reason that they're directed against them is because they don't have the resources of a large company, like a Kohl's or a Target, which have also been targeted and breached. So, but it's just easier if you look at the tendency of criminals. They look where it's easiest and less likely to get caught. So with all these small business targets, it just gives them a multitude of obvious opportunities to pursue. And the other factors that why they're going after small businesses is that small supply chains are particularly vulnerable. There's usually, if you're operating a retail store or if you have a service industry, you might have 4 or 5 vendors that work with you. You might have suppliers, you might have accountants, lawyers, insurance people. All those people are potentially a way into your system, to your network. And also you have a lot of employee turnover. Employees are usually the weakest link. They may leave something open. They may have their credentials on there for a while. There's all different types of opportunities for hackers to take care of, take advantage of that. And then the other thing is with retail, point of sale systems and online transactions. This was a natural migration for cyber criminals because it's become centralized. And when you have something centralized, it attracts basically all the attackers. So if you have an online site and they see you're taking credit cards over it, great, we can steal the credit cards. Or a point of sale system, if we get a man in the middle of that, we could also steal financial information. So there's a study that came out a couple of years ago by TrustWave, which is a really good cybersecurity firm, research firm, said that 17% of all cyber attacks were targeted at retailers last year in 2018. It's gone up, largely because we've become more online because of remote work, etc. Next slide, please. So what is the threat horizon and industry outlook for the retail industry and services industry? Companies in the retail industry will likely continue facing cybersecurity threats from cyber criminals and advanced persistent threat groups working with those criminals and nation-state governments I mentioned earlier. That is a certain trend. It's been documented over and over, and we see it on a lot of the attacks when we do monitoring on the horizon. They're doing it, during holiday shopping seasons. That's been a tradition for the last couple of years. The sales on Mondays, or Black Fridays, whatever it is. And they're also developing a lot of new products that target these advanced persistent threat groups use to obtain proprietary product information and give competitive market advantage. A lot of the tools are, and I'll get into that a little bit, are become automated. The tools that are exchanged and over the web by the hackers, and they work. And they're increasingly targeting the retail sector because companies are in transition. They've adopted new payment systems, a lot of them. They take advantage of basically any previously undetected vulnerabilities and security flaws in these systems. Oftentimes, companies don't have a strong IT shop that updates antivirus firmware or patches things, or they have people that leave. They said there's a cybersecurity shortage of individuals, so it's difficult for people to maintain a lot of this capability inside one store or a service. If you're a law firm or selling insurance, you usually have to rely on outside managed sources, and that's becoming another trend. Next slide, please. So what are some of these trends that I mentioned? I highlight some of these in my recent Forbes article. More companies are now moving to the cloud, hybrid cloud and edge platforms, and they're securing the bulk of their spending towards that. This has been becoming really common with retail, very common with service industries too. It is sort of like, why not have someone else manage my security and my data for me? It's good and bad because you still have to have expertise when you transition your data to someone else. You need to have who's sharing that data, who has access to it. Is it in a consolidated place where others can get to it? Is it configured right? So there's, do I need it? Can I have it if something goes down with the cloud? So there's pros and cons to the cloud, but most businesses are moving to the cloud, and most government agencies are moving to the cloud. The other big factor I think that's really impacting cybersecurity, which I've seen a lot personally, is these disruptive technologies coming online. The biggest, is Internet of Things. You're talking about billions of connected devices and sensors that now feed into your network. You got 5G coming online, which is going to rapidly bring down the speed of downloads and lessen latency. You've got the cloud and edge computing, bringing an operational shift to how you drive your security requirements. And then what I mentioned earlier, the threat actors and especially the state-sponsored ones are really taking advantage of the new cybersecurity attack surface. When we transitioned to a remote workplace, you basically took one office and created 1,000 office if you have 1,000 employees in your business. And so you create a large attack space. You bring down the security, and the IT shop doesn't have the visibility or the capability of monitoring everything. People mix up their personal devices. They may not have a secure router. They use unsecure Wi-Fi. So it makes the job of a security shop or the security information security officer, cybersecurity security information officer, much more difficult. And so this has been problematic in the last year. That's why we've seen a 350% increase in attacks under work from home. And in retail, you're seeing threat actors use increasingly turning away from point of sale systems, malware, towards credit card skimmers. This is really a combination of physical cyber and the digital part of it. But skimmers are easy to do. You see them in gas stations a lot, and basically say, again, the criminals go where the money is. And we're talking about how big the work from home expanded the attack surface, but the Internet of Things is going to exponentially change that even worse in the next couple of years. So there's going to be a lot of attack space and surface for cyber criminals to pursue. Next slide, please. This slide is just for your perusal. I mean, it was a comic that was put out a couple of years ago, but it really rings true. MIT has recently hacked a toaster to get into a computer. You have Ring now. A lot of people will be able to hack those, baby monitors. Basically, they go back to that axiom that everything connected is vulnerable. And the more you have connected in this scenario, you see everything is vulnerable, and they're all talking to each other and sending information. Next slide, please. So what are the trends that I mentioned that are going to probably have illuminating impact on us and also last a few years? One, of course, is COVID-19. It was a wake-up call for everybody, but and because of the remote work and the vulnerabilities and the lack of administrative security, and it was basically cybersecurity expert now calling this probably the largest ever cybersecurity threat. As I mentioned, because of all the connected attack space, because of all the home offices, because of businesses having to go almost entirely online. It's really changed the whole attack space and ecosystem for cybersecurity. And then, you know, the financial industries and healthcare industries, again, very big areas of focus. Go where the money is. And in this case, healthcare is not necessarily where the money is, but where the ransomware money is. Financial industry is where the money is. So those industries are particularly vulnerable, as is energy, as we seen yesterday by the Colonial Pipeline. Next slide, please. So emerging trends in the tech cybersecurity landscape, which I mentioned some of the emerging technologies just a little bit, but of course the cloud computing and edge computing, where you're doing something basically on your devices now, automation and adaptive networks, machine learning and artificial intelligence. I teach a class at Georgetown on disruptive technologies and organizational management, and we're seeing now. I just did a poll that artificial intelligence is probably one of the most impactful technologies of our time. It depends how you define artificial intelligence. Machine learning is really what most things are, memorizing and learning from patterns. But artificial intelligence is in its nascent stages, and companies and governments are investing heavily in it. And I just ran a poll on LinkedIn that 120,000 people responded to, and listed all these technologies you see here. And artificial intelligence had about 80% of the votes for the most impactful element in cyber, element in technology. In cyber too, it's being used to basically do threat detection, vulnerability assessments, automate defenses, and the bad part of it is that the bad guys are using it too. As I mentioned, that they're using automated phishing attacks. They're looking for vulnerabilities by scanning networks using machine learning technologies, big data, real-time analytics. With all the huge amount of data being provided from our computers and work and business, it's each year it's all in the rest of the years and before us in terms of volume. And all that data is a gold mine for a lot of hackers who seek to get secrets and sell those secrets. And then you have, of course, blockchain, which is a ledger system, which is proving to be pretty valuable for smaller businesses right now that don't have a lot of volume. They don't need to scale. You're seeing quantum computing come online. We're in the early stages of that, which is going to be able to basically change the speed and the rapid as is supercomputing, where you could instantly go through billions and billions of data points. You're seeing new biometrics and authentication technologies, particularly important in retail. You'll see it with the facial scans, you see it thumbprints, and also with a lot of employees for who have access. Cryptography and encryption, been around for a long time, but new types of algorithms are being developed, polymorphic encryption, and then also virtualization in gaming and augmented reality and virtual reality training. So all these are impacting the cybersecurity landscape. Next slide, please. So one of the things that is probably the most important when you talk about running any business, whether it be in the services industry or retail, is the compliance issues. Everyone has to pay taxes, and everyone has to abide by regulations and rules. And it's very costly for many businesses to operate. But more important is that you're dealing with privacy issues. You have data from consumers, particularly in retail, that may have very sensitive aspects to it. And so several years ago, European Union crafted what's called the GDPR, which is basically an initiative that requires companies to report and tell you that they have your data, what they're doing with it, and they also have to now report if there's a data breach that may involve that data within 72 hours. And this is not in the United States, but it's in throughout Europe, and they've gone after some companies that are global. But the power behind this is it's sanctions and fines. So it has implications for big companies and for small companies if you don't adhere to the privacy elements, which are really important in cybersecurity. Next slide, please. So all this is about the threats. So what do we do? That's the really big issue. And there's a lot we can do. And one, of course, is basic cybersecurity hygiene, strong passwords, etc. But the three prevalent themes in cybersecurity are basically how you address your preventive and your reactive cybersecurity is three ways. One is security by design. It's when you design your systems to be strong, fortified. You know what everything is, what who has access, where the weak points are. Unfortunately, most of us don't have the ability to do that because everything is already out there. On the internet, it's already out there. If you're using it, you can't really control that. It can be used more for SCADA systems, industrial control systems, but that's been an issue too because most of them are not modernized and are operating legacy systems. The second part, which has been more of a saying for the last 5 or 6 years, is defense in depth. Okay, we'll have antivirus, we'll have firewalls, we'll have encryption, we will have vulnerability monitoring, etc. That's great too. I mean, that really includes a lot of different elements to see what you need and how to protect yourself. The problem, again, goes back to a lack of qualified cybersecurity personnel to operate that defense in depth, and also understanding of how to orchestrate all these different technologies and policies and processes. So it's not as easy as it looks. And then the new one that's being touted is called Zero Trust. It's just don't trust anything connected, don't trust any people, and operate in that system. That's new and it's being promoted. It's really, my opinion is you use all three. Cybersecurity is based on risk management, and there's a group called NIST, which is part of the Department of Commerce, and basically their theme is identify, assess, respond to cybersecurity threats, and detect, protect, identify, recover, and respond. So if you keep those elements in mind, you can develop a security framework around that. Next slide, please. So when you're talking about any kind of framework, you have to have best practices. Each industry has different kinds of best practices. The payment card industry has their own data security standard. Most retail, depending whether it's a chain or a franchise, have different rules you can use, different types of systems that are able to be implemented, and other things about retail and service industries. And there's a trend now towards segmentation of networks. Is really what it's saying is that you have, if you're doing a point of sale system, or if you have information on your what you have, your items in your store or products or IP, you want to protect, you got to segment that, keep it away from rest of the network, keep it backed up, so that information, if it is breached, you have a backup for it. If it is ransomware, you can have a backup for it. Most companies are now looking at doing this, but most are not doing this, including big ones that have not segmented their operating systems from IT systems, etc. But that's something to watch. Next slide, please. So what do you do to cyber protect yourself and your company? And I'll leave this slide behind. This is really for everybody. That it's not just for companies, it's for people too. Employ strong passwords. Use multi-factor, biometrics, authentication, maybe a fingerprint, maybe an eye scan, facial recognition, maybe calling your device from a phone if you sign on with a code. Separate your work devices from your personal devices. A big problem, particularly with companies, is a meshing of information that appears on your phone and sometimes links that are malicious, that exfiltrates data. Update and patch regularly. That's really, you can do that on your Android, your iPhone, and you should, because they're discovering vulnerabilities pretty much every month. Use secure Wi-Fi. Most public Wi-Fi is insecure, so if you're going to the coffee shop, beware. You don't know who's sitting next to you, or you could pull up from your network. You have no protection. Do not click on any unknown emails or links. That's the best advice I think anyone could have, is because 90% of us are phished at some point during the day. And if you don't recognize the email, or if you don't recognize the link, don't click on it, and look at it twice, because it may look like it's real, but it may not be. Use antivirus software. Still will get some of and make it more difficult for some of the hackers to get in. The real sophisticated ones, nation states and criminal enterprises, can easily get through that, but a lot of your everyday hackers can't. Monitor your identity. People are surprised how much the identity theft is going on. It's so easy with social media to take a profile and copy it and put it in a different social media profile, or actually take that social media profile and find out what your social security number is, other items that are on the web, match it and create a new identity. And sometimes you don't know before it's too late. Back up your data and devices. Can't tell you how important this is that most of us don't do it. And we find out too late, that we don't have the data we wanted. Use multiple computers. I recommend you use a computer separate for your financial activities. Do nothing but that on that computer. Have incident response and resilience plans. This is important for every company, no matter how big or how small you are. You must be prepared how to react if something does happen. Have a plan to go in place to, first of all, get you back operating, mitigate the damages, and also control your reputation. And then do not overshare on social media. I'm guilty of this. I overshare too much. I'm in 70,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I tend to post a lot. But I figure that since everyone recognizes, those 70,000 recognize who I am, my profile, that someone will alert me if something is changed. And it has happened. My Twitter profile, my LinkedIn profile, my Facebook profile have all been impersonated and stolen. And I've actually heard from others that said they just got an invitation from me, but it wasn't me. So be vigilant about that. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of tools in protective devices you can, or not tools and applications you could probably use, better call, for cybersecurity. First one really is a process and a state of mind. Cybersecurity hygiene, again, that goes back to passwords, not clicking on unknown links, making sure that no one's looking over your shoulder. All the basic things you would do to secure yourself. Multi-factor authentication, advanced firewalls, there are companies that do that. Intrusion protection, antivirus, anti-malware, anti-spam. There's a ton of spam that goes out now. You can control those on your own computer controls. Encryption, I recommend that if you have a capability, if you're a business, encrypt. There are a lot of programs available. You don't necessarily need military-grade encryption, but if you have any sensitive data that could basically jeopardize the livelihood, encrypt it. Web application controls, patching, I mentioned that earlier. Data loss prevention tools to make sure that nothing's being exfiltrated or changing in your system. Vulnerability scanning, I'd recommend that you hire outside people to basically test your system, do red teaming on it, see where the vulnerabilities are, where you need to change your security, your tools, programs, where your vulnerability is. Then also, integrity, monitoring of your files, your red team, blue team, as I mentioned. And one of the biggest thing I think is really important for businesses is employee awareness training. Too few of us have that, and if they do have it, it's usually a 1 hour thing where you have someone talking in a video and people skip ahead. So part of the thing of being in any company, in any outlet, is it's being on the same team and knowing what tactics are used. And a good security information officer will be able to monitor the systems and see what trends are being used, what types of malware tactics are being used against colleagues and competitors. So you're able to follow that training and upgrade it regularly is really important. And then again, can't say how important it is to have incident response. You should have, if you're hacked by a state actor, obviously contact law enforcement. But if you're hacked by a criminal, contact law enforcement too, because they're part of the same thing with ransomware. This has really become a criminal issue globally. As I said, it affects everybody. It's not. There's no country it doesn't affect. Everyone is victim from it, even the people that may be state hackers. So it's really something you need to continually understand and monitor. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much. This is really just how to protect your business and on resilience. Refocus on resilience. This slide, and I'll leave it to USF to give it to you. it's a pretty good overview. It's rare when you find something in one slide that has everything you need to do sort of spelled out in a few sentences, but this does. So it sort of consolidates some of the things I've said earlier, but it's important. I mean, you never stop learning. I think one of the things about cybersecurity, information security, and actually about education generally is that there's so much to learn and so many aspects to it. And you should all be reading because, again, cybersecurity affects everybody. It's not just your business. It affects your anything you do. As we move more towards a digital world and we're more interconnected, it's going to have impact on your privacy. It already is. Who has knowledge of what you're doing, where, how, when, and they're goods, they're pros and cons. It could be turned into if you're in an authoritarian state, you could be at risk because they know everything about you. Or if you're an individual, you can take advantage of all these technologies and better your life. But technology is just an enabler, and cybersecurity is a protector of that enabler. And we have to protect our industries, our retail services, and in every aspect in a very serious way. And I think we've been neglected to do that. We have not invested enough. We have not put enough in terms of STEM and education. It needs to be really heavily recruitment and advancement in those areas. And I think we also primarily need to have better public-private cooperation. Governments have a ability to monitor threats better than private industry does, and sharing that threat information is vital. And this has been one of the lessons learned, I think, by the retail industry is that after the Target breach and several of the other ones, Sony breach, et cetera, they went to work with government closely and go through NIST training, following best industry protocols, et cetera. But next slide, please. So at this point, so we have around 15 minutes left. I would like to open this up to your questions. I saw that we may have a few really interesting questions.
Wonderful. Yes, exactly. Chuck, what a great presentation. I really appreciate it. We have quite a few questions. I'm going to bring them to you one at a time, and then you can just maybe answer them. But before I do, let me just tell you something that I learned in hospitality business. I'm a professor of hospitality technology, so I taught to my students PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. In there are 12 security principles that small businesses like hotels and restaurants needs to do. And what I learned at that time, that if they do some of them, which is kind of like almost similar to one of your slides, what they have to do, it looks complicated, but doesn't look complicated. So the analogy that I usually use is that if you go to vacation and if you turn on, open all the doors, windows, put a big sign, we are on vacation. That's what most businesses do. But if you lock the doors, make sure that you don't put a big sign and turn on the light so that people think that there is somebody. So those are the simple things. Do you agree with that, Chuck? I mean,
100%. I think you hit it right on the nail. I mean, for every industry, it's a little bit different. You know, for restaurant industry, it's been more difficult because of COVID-19 and other restrictions this year. But you're right. There's best practices, and they're available. And they're available through industry organizations. They're also available from NIST. And I strongly urge what the professor recommended is knowing those steps to take and keeping yourself not become a target.
Great, exactly. So let's get to the questions. Audience members have sent these questions. Let me just read them to you. I have a small business and do not have a huge budget for cybersecurity initiatives, I guess. Should I be worried? Will hackers target me?
Well, I think you have to go to the assumption that it doesn't matter how small you are, you could be targeted by someone because you're online, you're connected. So most small businesses don't have a huge budget. So what I recommend in that case is get a general expertise yourself. If you own the business, go out and read, learn what you need to do. There's certain tools you could buy. You can talk to other business owners, what they're using is successful. And you could also reach out to government, Small Business Administration, and others for help on a lot of this too. And they will give you best practices. They will recommend antivirus or firewalls, etc. But there's budgets enough for everybody to make it more difficult for hackers to get to you.
Wonderful. Great. Next question. I see some of my competitors started not accepting credit cards. I should say, Chuck, that in hospitality industry, in hotels, this is not an option. If you don't accept credit cards, restaurants though, in New York, I know that some restaurants actually stop accepting credit cards, cash only. They put sign. They work with cash only. Should I follow suit? What is your thoughts about that?
I think you're following following a trend that's going out of style. I think most, like you said, most in the hospitality industry are going digital with cards. People, just because of COVID, are not accepting cash now. You're seeing digital currency come online. So my recommendation is you need to learn how to work with credit cards. No matter how small you are, it's easy to do. It doesn't cost much. There are a lot of options there. And interesting enough, my actually start in my career, I came out of the hospitality industry. I worked for my sister's company called the Creative Impact Group, who's still around after all these years, but she produced shows and events, and we worked with hotels and entertainment and industry. And I've seen the metamorphosis now, where everything now is done through programs and applications online and management. And that includes all the transactional stuff with hotels and restaurants or any entertainment. So, there's liability with insurance issues. So, use also if you get playing cash and something doesn't go right, you're not going to get it back.
Exactly. And Chuck, another question. It kind of looks like that some of our viewers are quite scared of technology, cyber hackers. One person said once, this viewer says, the only system which is truly secure is the one which is switched off and unplugged. Do you agree? Should we decomputerize, I guess?
Well, that person's right. I mean, everyone that's connected, as I said, is vulnerable. But the reality is, we live in a world and society that is dependent upon digital commerce. So you can tune out and live off the grid, but you won't be much value to earning revenue or interacting with others. So that's why you have to take the best of the scenario and basically fortify your own security, not cut off altogether.
Okay, great. So Chuck, you already mentioned about IoT, devices. Internet, actually, even the cartoon that you showed kind of was making mock of people that, hey, for me to warm you up, you need to warm my bank account, like the thermostat was telling. Personally, I mean, I have also kind of side on this question. We have now many devices that are connected to Internet of Things like Alexa and even coffee machine. Should we worry or not use them? Just to add this, my personal experience, I am pretty, technology savvy person. I'm one of the first ones usually that try new ones, but this voice technologies like Alexa or Google, Assistant and stuff, I am a little bit skeptical because of the fact that it's always listening to you. So what is your thoughts on that as a personal level and also for businesses as well?
That's it really becomes a privacy issue. You're right. I think with some of these listening devices, it's sort of frightening sometimes when you're talking about something and you go on to one of your social media sites and all of a sudden the product comes up you're talking about. I'm not scared of my devices, but you have to watch them before they watch you. And with the Internet of Things, it's I guess how many devices someone asks. We're going to have estimated by Cisco and others that we're going to have over 50 billion in the next couple of years connected, and that there'll be 4 devices for every human. So it's a scary scenario, but I don't think we have to worry about everything. I think we have to worry about the ones like the rings or the others that may have a capability to listen to what we're doing. But there's now default and security on those that are doing better. But I'm happy with my coffee machine and my blender.
We just lost you, Chuck. I think there was a connection problem. Let's see if you are back. If you just say something.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We still cannot hear you.
I am here. Waving.
Looks like the computer. I mean, the microphone. Is there any problem with your microphone?
No.
Oh, now it's okay. Okay, it came back.
No, I'm fine. I'm just saying I'd only be worried about maybe the devices that can listen to you, but not the blenders and the coffee pots.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Here's the next question. We have quite a few more. How much can we trust the online companies? You mentioned cloud, right, as one of the trends, as the cloud companies. They will protect our data, like WhatsApp, Facebook, is not using them as solution, or if we are using it, what would be the things that we need to do?
Well, I think you cannot trust them. I think you're seeing evidence of that.
I know your internet is there.
Yeah, my internet's there. Everything's working here.
Looks like there's a disconnect in the microphone there. If there's a microphone, if you're using an outside microphone.
No, I'm using the computer. It seems to be working.
Unfortunately.
Is it working?
Oh, okay. I think the problem is from my side.
I think it's from your side. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. I think
okay, great.
From my side. Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So can you trust online companies? No. I mean, who are they? They're people that are in non-elected positions. They're out for revenue purposes, mostly the bottom line, and some of them have agendas, some don't. But it may not be your agenda. So you want to have your data be your own data. And every communication device that I've seen does have vulnerabilities, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, even Signal, for data at rest and other things. So I think you have to assume that for privacy purposes, don't share anything that you don't want the rest of the world to know. And then maybe someone earlier mentioned that, go back to paper, but if you just don't say anything sensitive that you think that would jeopardize your business or your personal sensitive data.
Wonderful. Here's the next question. Chuck, do you believe that digital currencies are safe? Can they be hacked? What is your general thoughts about risk of digital money?
Well, there are a variety of different types of digital currencies. Some are safe and most of them are not. They can be hacked, but now there's new ways of protecting them. Some are using blockchain and encryption. But the reality is that we're moving towards that direction of digital currencies. Banks are now studying it, and some are using it. It's going to be the currency of the future. So I don't think we'll have a choice, and we'll have to use them.
Absolutely. Okay. We hear that companies are hacked and consumer credit card numbers are stolen. Customers do not, react to these things anymore. Do we get used to these? Should companies not worry about them? I guess when you are hacked.
I think complacency is a terrible thing. It can destroy lives. People have, lost deeds to their houses, other things from being hacked. Most people haven't. Most times it's just a small thing and they say, no big deal. But when the stakes get higher, when you get a ransomware attack and you say, okay, I want $200,000, but I don't have $200,000. So, then what do you do? So never take anything for granted, never be complacent, and don't rely on just companies to protect you. Rely on your own cyber hygiene.
Absolutely. Okay. Here's the next question, Chuck. I do not want to use a consultant after I am being hacked. Is there an affordable business model to hire a cybersecurity professional that I can utilize before I am hacked?
Yeah, I think it's trending now that there's no managed cybersecurity services, and there's a variety of type of capabilities. You don't necessarily have to go with the high end unless you're a company that's doing a lot of revenues and commerce and you need extra protection. If you're a small business, there are plenty of IT experts that know the basics, that can put in the right antivirus software and firewalls and know what products. So I think the good idea is to ask around. If you're a small business, look who's what other person's using, get references. Personal references in cyber are just as important in any other type of business.
Yep. Chuck, there is one question about the biometric information. If my credit card is stolen, the bank sends me a new one. So there's a new number, no problem. But what would I do if my biometric info is stolen, like my, let's say, face recognition or iris scan or fingerprint?
That's a good question. Most of these devices, they disable that. There's ways of doing that. So if your card, they basically take that offline. If you don't know it's stolen, and also someone has to be pretty sophisticated to understand how to get to the biometrics. It wouldn't necessarily be your everyday hacker. It would if they're a criminal enterprise or a state-sponsored group, then I think you have more of a problem, and then you need to go to law enforcement again and maybe look at different type of biometrics on your future cards. But for the most part, they don't spend the time on doing that because they have easier pickings, and they don't want to spend a lot of time and effort on something when they have so many targets out there.
Okay, great. And here's one more question, and we are almost out of time, so we're going to wrap it up soon. Do you believe that future wars will be based on cyber hackings instead of firearms, bombs, etc.?
I think they already there's going to be a huge element to cyber attacks. If you look at multi-domain warfare, and you have the ability to take out a network of devices, you disable your enemy. All the different types of tanks and planes and communication systems and weapons. They're integral to all the geolocation and everything like that. I don't think firearms and bombs will be replaced because it's still people that are still fighting. But I think the wars of the future will be much quicker and perhaps more deadlier. And we still have to realize that there's a huge threat from weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, and biological, and other things as we're seeing in this world. Is there's no guarantee, but cyber is playing a bigger element than ever before.
Great. And Chuck, let's take this question as the last one. What are the career opportunities in cybersecurity? I want to add to this particular question for my students, that is this something that, again, about your career, can you become a cybersecurity professional after the fact? Let's say that you have a degree in business, something, or is this something that you have to go back to the Bachelor of Science? Can you educate yourself to be a cybersecurity professional? What are the kind of like some of the career opportunities in this field?
First of all, it's wide open, and you can pretty much almost write your ticket. There's a lot of ways to advance your cybersecurity, and you don't have to have a background in cyber. You can have a background in liberal arts and music. Some actually the best people in cyber come out of music, by the way. But you just have to really understand how technology works, what the latest and newest technologies are, what the processes are. And it's not just technical. There are plenty of other aspects to cyber. There's the public relations end of it. There's the management end of it. There's the sales and marketing end of it, cyber, which is huge if you're talking about working for a company that sells cyber security products, which is a huge industry. And secondly, there's a lot of degree programs which are great, and it depends how far you want to go if you're in computer science or other things. But there's also certificate organizations out there like CompTIA and SANS and others that can train you to work on an industrial system or some other element too. But I encourage everyone to at least learn the basics about cybersecurity, and it's a great career path, and it's really good to combine with everything, because everything you do in business is going to have some sort of connectivity to cybersecurity.
Wonderful. Chuck, this is perfect timing with our session here. I really appreciate it. I would like to, just before we close it, give you the floor to any closing remarks.
No, I just want to thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure speaking in a forum that has a lot of people very interested in the topic, and in retail and in the service industries. Really is a topic that should be of greater focus in this area. People are just sort of oblivious to it, and I think we need to all take note of what is happening in our world and the importance of cybersecurity. And I think we all, you said, self-educate, go out and read, learn, go online to some of these groups that offer solutions and ideas. There's plenty of information out there, and it's just a question of how much you want to learn.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Wonderful. I also would like to thank our audience for great questions. This session concludes the first day of GLOSERV conference. Tomorrow we're going to start at 8:15. Please go to gloserv.org for the schedule, and we look forward to being with you tomorrow as well. Chuck, again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
It's been my pleasure. You too.